Hello, I'm David Heyman, and I play Brace on the TV show Taboo. And you're listening to the Shat on TV podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Taboo Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit FX and BBC series Taboo. I am one of your hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Lyons.
I won't be dead, and I won't be happy. You can depend on that.
And this is our deep dive episode where we look back on this week's episode of Taboo and provide our immediate reactions, thoughts, and analysis. This week's episode was episode 6. Guys, what did you think?
We talked briefly. I couldn't tell if you were joking or not, Raj, when you messaged us about this and said that this episode wasn't one of the best. I thought you were actually trying to counter what you normally do, which is spoil it for me. And no, I love this one. I thought it was one of the better ones. I got almost everything I wanted out of this episode. I couldn't be more pleased.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was an episode that finally gave us a little tougher road for James. We've watched him through the first 5 or so episodes kind of get what he wants, and he seems to always be a step ahead. And it was bound that he was going to take a fall, and this one really gave him a few big setbacks, but it also added a few layers of intrigue to the story that I think really make it compelling, and there was some good writing in this episode.
So if you're a fan of the show, if you've never listened before, this is how we work. We don't go in a plot-by-plot format where we rehash the entire episode to you. We take ideas and big buckets of the episode, and we dive deeper into those. We also do a weekly listener feedback email response show called River Rants that we release every Friday. If you'd like to be part of that, our email address is hosts@shatontv.com. You can also find all of our email and listener feedback on our website at shatontv.com. So the topics that we'll be discussing today are what we learned from Chun-Li and the Powder Factory, Chichester investigates the sinking of the Cornwallis, the EIC strikes back, is James crazy and time in the river being reckless, and we'll finalize the episode with Zilfa killing Thorne. So that's those are the topics that we're going to discuss today. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so Rod, you said the impression you got from online and from Twitter was negative.
Yeah.
What were some of the complaints?
There was about 95% exposition, 5% things happening, and they seem to rush through some of the major plot points. Like Zilpha killing Thorne after, possibly a redemption to Thorne could have potentially happened. The fact that Winter dies at the end, they seem to be just, there's not a lot. This seems to be a firecracker that goes off at a 4th of July show that doesn't quite expand the way that you want it to.
Yeah, I took a completely different angle on it in the sense that we finally get to see a couple of things. We finally get to see James and Zilpha together physically. You finally get to see Thorne killed. You finally get to see the dark side of James and see James failing. You finally get to see the EIC really take a shot at him, not just like these, little, kind of wacky attempts by the Americans to kill him, but like a legit shot at him. And I don't know, for me, it was immensely satisfying, and we also got to see really the darker side of Zilpha, which we'll get into. But that was immensely satisfying. Plus, the chloride got finished. You had the tenseness of like, are they going to get caught? Will it explode? I don't see anything lacking in this episode.
Yeah, I think we also got some good background on James's mother and their relationship and some of the history between them, and also James leading more down the path of his spirituality and what is the true origin of the visions he's having. And I think some of that became clearer, but we still have some bigger mysteries. And if people think that it was all exposition, sometimes you need that. You need to have 1 or 2 breather episodes, and I think we're really building towards a giant climax at the end. We had one of our writers come in and say that they want to see a boom. And I really think this might be the breath before the final sprint, and I was completely fine with it.
I do agree to some degree with Raj and other viewers, though, that it is feeling like it's a bit late in the game for some resolutions, and so they could have made one action-packed episode where a bunch of stuff happened, and in this case, it seems like the big. I see where they're coming from, where the big points weren't grand. They weren't there weren't big bangs in there. It was more like these knives in the dark and the sort of thing. I mean the best example of it is when Thorne gets killed. It's a very silent and a subdued thing. But I'm glad that we have again, it's one of the strengths of the show when you got three people on is you can have those different opinions. So we have a voice for each segment of the audience and how they feel about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're getting a lot of text messages and a lot of tweets since Legion recently debuted also on FX, wishing that we had reviewed Legion, as that seems to be a more mainstream show. I will say this, though. The Taboo audience that is following along with us, that is sticking with the show, is very loyal. They are they're powering through, and there is a niche audience for this. So I just got to ask the question, guys. I don't see, even though there have been reports that, Stephen Knight and the creators want to go past season 1. There's a lot of reports coming out of The Guardian that I posted on Shat on TV and other reports that this has not lived up to the expectations from a ratings perspective. Doesn't seem to have built an audience. Do you think we're going to get a season beyond this?
I read a couple articles today that were contradictory to that actually Legion had underperformed what they expected, considering the millions and millions they pumped into it with the advertising during the Super Bowl. Now, it has excelled in certain areas, but within the U.S. audience, it's not doing as well. And I don't think they really went into it expecting that it was going to be a blockbuster hit for them. FX really is focused on creating some darker content for a niche audience. They're not expecting 10 million viewers, but they're still getting over the 1.5 million. It's still a steady, constant audience. And the article that you referenced talked about whether they're going to recoup the actual investment put in by Tom Hardy, that he's actually possibly now down 2 million, but they're saying at this point it's recouped like 8.5 in advertising. And that's before they've even contacted Hulu or Amazon or a streaming service. But I don't think it's a complete loss for FX or the BBC.
Yeah, and a quick point on that. I kind of called from the get-go, and I still stand by it, that I would not be surprised if this only goes one season, because a show that might appeal to me as far as no message of redemption, nobody wins, everything fails, it's all gloom and doom and dark notes and people fucking each other over and being killed in the night and incest. Like that's right up my alley, but that is not by any means the general palette of the viewing audience. So I totally understand that, and I've loved lots of shows like Carnival that were ended a little too early, I thought, but I understood that it wasn't for everyone.
Well, I like to look at the undercurrent in terms of shows, and Westworld debuted, I think, at respectable numbers, but they were worried. They were like, well, right out the gate, is this going to be a show? And then you saw as the season went on with Westworld, there was an undercurrent. People started, once they heard about the show, it just grew to become part of, society. I mean, everyone was talking about the show Westworld. It was on SNL. It was part of, it was part of pop culture. Now you look at, so I look at Reddit, right? Reddit's the front page of the internet. We're six episodes into Taboo. The Taboo subreddit has about 4,200 subscribers. Legion, after one, has 6,800 subscribers. And you have to believe that once people understand what the show Legion is and they watch it, and you're going to see those subscribers grow.
Yeah, but I don't see that as a measure of art or a measure of the quality of television. For instance, you're going to see Legion cosplay at Comic-Con. You're not going to see shit on Taboo.
I've already seen cosplay of Taboo. People have already gone to parties dressed as Taboo.
That's just Brooklyn hipsters, though.
That's true.
Yeah, and you got to realize the superhero X-Men comic book audience, you already have a built-in base. You have to explain to people what is Taboo. if you're a superhero fan and you've read the comics or you know the X-Men or who Legion is, you're going to have an automatic head start on Taboo. So you're never going to compete.
Counter argument to that, though, is that Legion doesn't have Tom Hardy. Mm-hmm. So you've got Ridley Scott and Tom Hardy involved on a project that carries some weight, and you would think that it would have some. I do stand by the idea that I think this turns a lot of people off. If I took my like an average friend that I have and sat them in front of Taboo, they're gonna go, "What the fuck is this?" Mm-hmm. If I take them sit in front of Legion, they go, "Okay, I get it."
Well, listen, if you guys, and I don't mean to plug Legion, I'm just saying like the dichotomy that we're having from an audience standpoint is people came along with us. Some people are sticking with us. A lot of people have written to us, and they're like, listen, we dropped off after episode 2, after episode 3. There was a lot of advertisement for the show. There was a lot of hype. You forget the amount of money that they spent on advertising. You talk about the advertising for Legion during the Super Bowl. Think of all the advertising they did for Taboo leading up during the NFL playoffs. I mean, and it debuted to great numbers.
I do want to point out, though, that I forgot the name of the guy, but the guy that would write us like every week, it'd be like, you guys are only doing shows that are namby-pamby, Marvel shows, and you just want to do it because you're going to see how many listeners you can get, and why don't you do it on actual art?
You're just chasing the numbers. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, just chasing the numbers. And I'm like, well, clearly we're not, because the numbers aren't here, but we believe in this show. I still believe in this show. It's something that satisfies me, and if it goes away after one season, I get it. I don't regret doing it. And this is the thing. Look, we did this. We missed out on the Young Pope. We missed out on the Expanse. We missed out on Legion. You're never going to be able to do all the shows. And with Westworld, we didn't know how it was going to do. We had no idea it was going to be huge. We did it because it was a show the three of us wanted to watch. And we get together every week and talk about it. And this is a show we get together every week and talk about. And some of the stuff we're going to love and some of the stuff we're not going to love. Is it the best show I've ever seen in my life? No. Do I like aspects of it? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you haven't watched the show Legion, it's also on the same network. FX is killing it right now. FX is killing it between this, Atlanta, The Americans. It's Sunny. What else am I missing from FX? But anyway, if you're looking for a Legion after show, Let's Talk Legion, unbiased plug there for the guys, Jay and Ryan over there. So, that being said, the first topic is what we learned from Chun-Li and the Powder Factory Gene.
So in this episode, we get a look at what's actually going on. Big D's had his theories of how much powder they intend to make and what they intend to do with it. Here we start getting some ideas of, first of all, they are going ahead with the chlorite plan, which is incredibly dangerous, and they have to involve more people. The more people you involve, the more risk you run, and it's inevitable that someone's going to give it up. But in the meantime, they do take the risk, and they're found out. So that leads to a string of very dangerous moves done by James and crew.
Yeah, well, I have to ask here. We had questioned why he would involve Robert, who we've learned now is the young boy, who is at worst his half-brother, but possibly his son. Why would he involve him in this plot that's so dangerous? He has an entire group there that's now going to stir. It really puts a ding into the armor of James as some form of hero or good guy, that he's willing to risk an immediate family member when there's no need to have him there.
And he seems pleased that Robert's getting in on the act. One of the key things to this whole plot is you start to see, again, James using different people to secure different aspects of his plan. In this case, he's using Dumbarton to essentially move this stuff under the guise of cholera. That gives them the entire movement. Without Dumbarton, he's dead in the water. He's got nowhere he can move this stuff in London. He'll be found out. So James indicates that he's going to move this stuff to the Americans to assist the American blockade. And also they come up with this idea of the cholera epidemic. If that was confusing, basically they're saying they're moving these dead bodies. There's an epidemic of cholera. There's no epidemic of cholera. And that's allowing them to move around without inspections.
But what's funny is they've said that the rumor of cholera has actually become reality. So now they have 6 fatalities, actually, where the Examiner has claimed them to be cholera. So now the rumor is really taking on a life of its own. But the big thing I took away from this scene with the powder factory is we learn a lot about what James' motivations are. Everything now is time sensitive. James is really pushed against the wall that he actually has to start using the chloride to speed up the process to get the gunpowder to Dumbarton. But also we learn that when he is exposed, when the farmer goes and actually reveals the fact that James's secret factory is within his farmhouse, James is he has a conundrum. Do I either burn down the cottage? Do I hide the evidence? What do I do? Because the actual gunpowder that's left behind is not finished. It's actually in a volatile state, even by chloride standards. So by moving it, there's a good chance he's going to kill himself and everyone with him. Why do you think James really needed the gunpowder that badly and didn't just say, hey, let's write it off as a loss?
I mean, again, I think that he now knows his factory's been found out. There is no making more. So in that sense, he doesn't have the time to create anymore. It's a pretty clear indication that he is a do or die kind of guy. He's not going to stop at this point.
Yeah, so that says he's lost the factory, so he's not producing any more gunpowder that he could possibly be trading, that he could actually be selling. So this one load of gunpowder that he has created is extremely valuable to him and plays a key role in whatever his end game is, that he would risk his own life and everyone's life to save it.
What's interesting is I was not surprised at all by the farmer giving it up. In fact, I think we talked about, when we first saw the scene of where the factory would be, I think all three of us were kind of confused by why you would do it in such a place where there's clearly a witness and a guy who's not necessarily loyal to you. And I noted that he was the one person that James paid off and did not make any, overtly violent overtures toward. And that happens to be the guy who, ends up cheating him. And I think it's a lesson to James on that's going to just make him doubly violent.
So now I may be going completely out on a limb here. Dumbarton, we've been led to believe the entire time is working with the Americans. But it doesn't, there's something going on that I really couldn't put my finger on until Lorna has a conversation with James, that the Crown suspects that he is actually selling the gunpowder to the Republicans, and he's possibly going to start a revolution in London. Is there any possible chance that Dumbarton is actually a member of the British Revolution and not an American agent? And the reason I say this is, whether it is the Countess or it's Lorna, whoever is Carlsbad, it doesn't seem to be a conversation going back and forth between one and the other. Information isn't flowing as if they were both on the same team.
Right. I mean, the evidence we have that Dumbarton is American is a couple of things. One is, or working with the Americans, is that he has an American accent. He seems to be knowledgeable about America. He seems to be conveying information about the blockade, but that's all stuff you can manufacture. There hasn't been any corroboration from any other source saying that this is the guy. He does, however, seem to have excessive capabilities in London, so I'm still willing to, at this point, believe that he is in cahoots with the Americans, but I don't know if that's, for certain.
Well, you remember early on when Dumbarton and James first meet, there was a few key facts that James, we assumed, had gotten wrong about the United States. One of them being he wanted to meet the president of the 15 United States, when 15 wasn't the actual number. He mentions the president, but yet the president he wanted to meet with wasn't actually in office. We thought he was just wrong. There's a possibility that he was testing to see how much of American actual structure and knowledge he was actually had, or whether he could just be pretending to be an American asset and was really an American in London working for the revolution.
So the next topic I want to talk about is Chichester investigating the sinking of the Cornwallis.
So in episode 5, we see Chichester going further in the actual investigation of the sinking of the Cornwallis. The Cornwallis and the Influence are the same ship. It was renamed to sort of obscure the illicit dealings of slaves aboard the ship. This is the one that was sunk, and we're starting to see parallels between the sinking of this and James's flashbacks.
Yeah, so Chichester, we learn, is a former slave himself, and he has traveled quite a bit and is quite knowledgeable. He had said earlier on that we believe that there was 280 souls on board, some children, some men, and that the actual ship was manned only by a skeleton crew, which led to it going aground after only 4 days. And at that point, in an effort to not be discovered at what they were doing, because it was highly illegal, was to nail down the cargo hold and actually scuttle the ship, killing willingly all 280 on board. The East India really has a vested interest in keeping this information quiet for the company aspect, but we learned a lot also about actually Sir Strange's family, how they had a hand in this as well.
Right. So, like you said, the slave trade done aboard East India ships was not necessarily approved of by the board itself. So this leads to a certain this puts Strange in danger in the sense that we know that his brother now has or at the time had a sugar plantation in Antigua, and that he does not want this thing to be found out about. So when you look at it from that perspective, you understand that Strange is not necessarily approved of by the board. He can get in a lot of trouble here. And so he's going to take every effort to cover this up, which is another piece now that they have on Strange, which makes him, get really, really antsy and start getting violent. So to clarify again, East India ships were not approved of to be moving slaves. And in fact, I believe there was an abolitionist on the board of the East India. So this would definitely not fly at the top levels. So we learned that, again, that the captain, in order to cover up the evidence, ordered the cargo hold to be nailed shut. We've seen James in his flashbacks doing just that. So this seems to place him on board the Cornwallis / the Influence. And that kind of explains, we're starting to see the pieces come together here, the way it's all connected.
Did you buy the fact that the East India reps, this was the first they had heard of this?
Yeah, I believe so. They seem to be in the dark about it. Strange, this seems to be directly connected to Strange and not many other people at the East India Company.
So after their initial meeting, we had questioned, I think 2 weeks ago, about what was the relationship with the Sons of Africa in Chichester and James. We now know there is a direct connection. After the meeting with the East India, Chichester actually goes to the offices of the Delaney Shipping Company looking for James, actually calls him by name. So I think from now on, we have to know that there is a direct connection, and whether James had been funding them, James had actually had a hand in providing possibly the information that led to this investigation. If they had scuttled the ship and killed the 280 slaves on board, you'd imagine they would have buried the documentation as well. So James might have been that spark that provided the first nugget of information that led the Sons of Africa here.
And interestingly, we talked last episode about this becoming less and less about Nootka Sound. And again, in this episode, it was nothing about Nootka Sound, really. I mean, as far as the power struggle there. So this event, this discovery, this investigation causes Strange to say, he relates it to a chess game, and he's ready to move some pieces. They are actually ready to mobilize now against us. This is what has lit the fire. So he says Chichester is the bishop. The king is safe, so the king of England is out of play. Delaney is their horse, meaning, the attacking piece, and Prinny is their queen. Prinny being a reference to George IV. So they see George IV as the most dangerous offensive piece and critical to controlling him to control the board.
But this is evidence, though, that James was indirectly, not indirectly, but he was directly working for Strange. He was on Strange's, what's the word I'm looking for here? He was
his Black Ops team.
Yeah, it was his Black Ops team. Thank you.
I mean, it seems to be if you picked a skeleton crew for this job, you want people that you can trust, people that are not going to, screw you over, and can keep their secrecy. It almost actually, creates a sort of a parallel between what James is doing with his ship. He wants his League of the Damned.
Okay, but when we first see Strange interact with James, Strange acts as if he's never seen James before. So do you think that he was actually working for Strange or Strange's brother or some member of his family?
Well, I mean, think about it this way, Raj. If you had a guy who'd worked, on your payroll, essentially, to move some slaves illegally and then nailed them shut, let them drown, you thought he was dead and he came back, you would not want in any way to be associated with him. You don't know the guy, you never talked to the guy, and maybe he never directly did. I mean, you would think Strange would want to insulate himself to some degree from the actual, goings on aboard the Cornwallis.
Whether or not James believes that Sir Strange remembers him, we know that in their first encounter that Strange is completely aware of who he is because he was briefed on James's history in the IC. And he chooses to play ignorant to the fact. So we don't know whether he truly remembered him, but it would be consistent with his character that he would try to keep all information as close to the vest as possible, not to tip James off. If he knows right away in that meeting, I remember you, There's no playing coy. There's no game of chess. All the pieces are out in the open for everyone to see.
Well, the next topic I want to talk about exactly is the East India Truck Company and the fact that it seemed to, and we've used these allusions a lot in the comparisons to Star Wars, but this is when the EIC struck back.
Yeah, there's no doubt that they finally took the gloves off. Now, whether it was James bringing in Sir Strange and his family into the fray, that it's no longer about the East India, it's more personal to him. But he makes it a point. He says, we're going to attack where he is not defending. And that starts with one of the key assets that James has is his ship. Do you think, though, is there a possibility, Gene, that another area he's not defending or the people who are close to him that he cares about, one possibly being Winter?
I take James at his word that he doesn't care that much. Like, he really does not care for these people. He's allowing himself to only surround himself with people that he does not care about. The exception being Zilpha. I don't think that Winter is necessarily a part of that, but that does, at the end of the episode, we get that mystery of what happened to Winter. He wakes up and she's dead, and you don't know exactly what happened there. Did he kill her? Did somebody kill her on his behalf? And I think we really have to go back and and I invite, again, the listening audience to this too, go back and scour that scene and see what evidence you can find. Obviously, when the sun is up, there's some evidence around there. You see the burnt hull of a ship. You see her body and its placement. You know that she brought him a drink late that night. And so you really have to look at that. But I don't think that Winter's a part of it. And in fact, another piece of evidence why is that when they take out the ship, they make sure that they have a representative there to say, hey, the gloves are off, this is war, so that there's no mistake about who blew up the ship. It wasn't the Crown, it wasn't, somebody that he screwed over, it wasn't an assassin, this was the East India Company, they want you to know it. I would think that they would leave some sort of message if they did it with Winter as well.
And I think this is just another sign of James becoming completely reckless. The EIC has openly declared war on him, and what does he do? He chooses to get blackout drunk, walk around town alone. He goes into Godder's workplace and threatens him and chokes him out. He is almost like a criminal who's trying to get caught. I just don't know what his end goal is here. It's not going to work well. But again, this is consistent with his character. He had already cut off one of the Legion of the Damned, his thumb, because he either believed he was going to turn on him or he had. Is that the man you leave guarding your most prized asset, your ship?
Atticus asks that question for the audience in the scene where James is killing the guy and taking his heart out, essentially, while he's taking a leak. And this question, Dick, is very significant to the show. Atticus asks, he says there's two possibilities of why he's doing it. One, you knew he was going to do it, and that's why you cut his finger off. Or two, you cut his finger off, and that's why he did it. He says one of them is witchcraft, the other one is reason, essentially. And so that, to me, is essentially the writers expressing the theme of the show. It's brilliantly done. It's poetic. It's Atticus speaking, through that fourth wall again, essentially, and basically saying, okay, look, what's going on here? So, and it does bring us back to that central question we keep asking is, does James know what's going to happen and act on that, or is he just using reason to set up these pieces? I think it was really well done.
Yeah, there's no way that James, if he had known this would be the outcome, would risk his ship. Because right now he's in a situation that is untenable. He's lost. He needs a ship. He's trying to convince Helga to go slit a captain's throat and steal a ship. That's not going to work. He's being completely foolish. When he cuts out the guard's heart, he says, leave the body where it can be found. He is spiraling quickly out of control in a way that is not the character that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 episodes. He's very controlled, very methodical. He's unraveling quickly, so I don't think any of this was foretold, any kind of foresight he had had.
But why is he all of a sudden now unraveling, just at the loss of his ship? Doesn't it seem a little out of character for him?
Well, there's a lot falling apart at once. I mean, this is the thing. We see that Brace's conversation with them has as much of a psychological impact as anything else. It affects his sex life. It affects his dreams. It affects his reaction to water. It's all over the place, and he's not doing well. I think that the more he discovers about what he is and what his history is, the more it's hard for him to function normally. I also think that he's getting so close. The pressure is building. And you see on all sides people losing their cool, except for Coop. You see, Zilpha's lost her cool. the EIC has lost its cool, the Crown has lost its cool, the Americans are losing their cool, and James is too. So you've got this pressure cooker that's going on, and it seems like it's building toward some huge finale and an explosion of sorts, literal or figurative.
Yeah, and I don't want us to underestimate the reveal and the impact that learning that his mother possibly had tried to kill him as an infant. His entire part of his rage is focused on the mistreatment of his mother and how his father was the bastard who had imprisoned her and killed her and was responsible for her death. And his mother was held in some high esteem. But the news that comes from Brace rattles his world. It rattles it to the point where he's questioning everything. We've started to see his visions change to all of the encounters in the water that used to be what we believe is Anna solo. Now the pieces are starting to fit in that James may have actually been lucky to have survived that event with his mother in the river.
So is James truly turning crazy, or is his time in the river? Is he being reckless here? Does the fact that his mother tried to drown him, did that have some sort of lingering effect on him? What the hell is going on in those river scenes and those flashbacks?
Well, there's one thing I took from it. The first scene when he's in the room when the episode opens and the vision of the river again. If you were watching with subtitles, the actual apparition, whoever's in his vision, reacts with door slams and she gasps. So it's not just James recalling an event, having a one-way communication. If it is something that's in his mind, it would make sense because his visions are completely being controlled and affected by his environment. So Brace walking up and closing the door, why would his mother in the river react to that? But she audibly did. She gasped. So that leads me down that either James is crazy and this is all a figment of his imagination, which is influenced by his immediate surroundings, or it is a two-way connection and it's not a memory.
But it seems as if when he goes into the rivers, it's like he immediately goes crazy. At the end, he tells Winter, you need to get away from me when I'm like this. And when he's having the flashbacks of the river, when he's having sex with Zilpha, he immediately starts choking her out. So, what is happening here? I just don't get this. Is it witchcraft? Is it insanity? Is he missing a few screws? What the hell is happening here, Gene?
So I think you look at it two ways. So one way to look at it is that his mother's spirit is reaching out to him. Now, we see that they say again that the madness runs through the umbilical cord. In this episode, we see James going crazy or exhibiting signs of how crazy he is. Zilpha, at the same time, does it get weirder? Even before she kills Thorne, the way she's staring at Lorna, the way that she shows up at James's home, like she killed a body and just left it there. It's you see that reason is not really there. And what do these people all have in common? Zilpha, Horace, James, they're all related, and Anna as well, Salish. So I think that madness is a much more likely explanation than any sort of a supernatural bond. Especially if, and this brings us to the question of, when James and Zilpha do have sex, when they finally, consummate, if he has had sex with her before, and this is the first time this apparition has appeared, you've got to know that this is psychological. Because the only difference is now he knows that his mother tried to kill him, or he's been told that. If he has never slept with her before, and this is the first time, then you think it's more supernatural, where she is reaching out through the blood to him.
Yeah, and Gene, did you pick up on the reveal in the conversation when Zilpha shows up at his house soaking wet, admits to killing Thorne? She tells James, I did what you told me. I killed him. James's reaction, he says actually something I believe to the lines of, when did I? And just lets her go with it. So we had a big debate a few episodes ago against remote rape and whether he was actually in there communicating with her. James doesn't seem to know that he told her to kill him, that there was that connection. So there might not have been this remote connection. And this is just Zilpha manifesting James in her head to kill, because James doesn't seem to remember giving that command.
Yeah, I wouldn't conflate the two. I think that James is capable of contacting her remotely through sort of astral projection. I think in this case, she's become so accustomed to that she doesn't recognize that this might be something else, either something demonic or, I think more likely, this is hers. This is her inner demon, speaking out. And in that case, we could see, I really hope that in the next 2 episodes, we get an explanation of all this that is chilling, that is fantastic, and that is, that really leaves us all, anybody who's a doubter, going, man, I'm glad that I finished this. Kind of talking about that though, as far as, James's reaction to his mother, after Brace gives him the revelation, we see that he starts to see images of her trying to kill him, and he's defending himself in all those situations. But we don't know if Brace is telling the truth. Again, if James is crazy, then Brace is just playing on that insanity. So I'm unsettled. I swing back and forth on Brace. I don't know if he's telling the truth in this case.
Yeah, this was the first time that I actually felt Brace was concerned. There was no malice. There was no ulterior motives. It seemed, honestly, he was trying to shield James from the horrible truth. And as much as the thought that his father had wronged his mother and had led to her death and imprisoned her had tormented James, it also gave his life purpose. But when James goes on his 2-day, which turns into 3-day investigating routine, Lorna seems honestly concerned. She seems really worried about James. Brace really isn't worried. So again, that works contradictory to my original thought here. But do you think that Lorna's concern was for James's well-being, or were there possibly other ulterior motives that made her so inquisitive?
Yeah, her concern is not romantic, and we get that from the conversation she has with James when he gets back.
Not necessarily romantic, but she cares for James as a person.
No, I don't think so. I mean, she might care for James as a person, but the overriding care there is strategic. The conversation she has with James when he gets back, she scolds him. She tells him the folly of his strategy. She tells him where he's going wrong. She gives him advice. And this is the first time that we see James kind of treat someone as an equal intellectually, where he kind of goes, huh, yeah, yeah, okay. So that to me, again, we've talked about the possibility that Lorna is Carlsbad. She seems, this is not just an actress. I mean, her mind is really cranking on this. No offense to actresses or actors, very intelligent people. I'm just saying in this case, she is no simple actress of the London Theatre in 1814 who doubles as, a prostitute. She is very, very smart and likely strategically knowledgeable. That leads me to believe that she's more than we suspect.
So if Lorna and Dumbarton are in cahoots, why would she be worried?
Right, that's a good question, Raj. So basically, here we go, okay, if Lorna is Carlsbad, then why would she be worried? Dumbarton knows what James is off doing. Wouldn't he communicate to her what's going on so she wouldn't have to be worried? She's still going around. And again, it's those scenes when people are alone and the decisions that they make that lead us to see, to believe what their true intentions are. She goes to Thorne and Zilpha's home. She goes all around searching for James. And she would not really have to worry that much. I mean, even if she's putting on a show for Brace, she could just leave the house and go wherever and come back. So clearly, there seems to be either 2 possibilities here. Either one is that, she knows that James is gone but doesn't know where, and that lack of contact is bothering her. Like, she doesn't know the status of the mission. Or Dumbarton really isn't in cahoots with her, in which case she either isn't Carlsbad or he isn't working for the Americans. So there's a lot going on here, which makes it interesting. And I think that, as you said before, Raj, this is the type of show that we've been told when we go back and watch it once it's all over, all the pieces will be very apparent. We just haven't picked up on them yet. So I'm looking forward to that.
The last topic I want to talk about is the fact that Zilpha does kill Thorne. We talked about this at great lengths last episode about the redemption possibility of Thorne, the fact that James did not kill Thorne. He spared him and was possibly going to use him to his advantage. That was quickly dismissed in this episode when Zilpha just straight up catches him while he's sleeping, I guess finds his liver, and then stabs him with a sword right down there.
No, I got the vibe that she stabbed him in the heart.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she was feeling for the rib, so she accidentally didn't waste her one jab and hit her rib. He wakes up and disarms her. She slipped it quietly between the ribs.
One of the really cool touches in regards to this is you notice when Lorna goes and visits the home and she walks in the room, Thorne's still alive. Zilpha comes out. She's clearly been beaten. She's swollen around the eye and looks terrified. And she's still kind of playing the dutiful wife. She refuses to call a carriage for Lorna and kind of dismisses her and all that stuff. She comes in and she puts a blue flower on the table. And so she was very clear about it being visible. She wanted it to be seen. So I looked into that, and floriography was actually a Victorian era language of flowers, and it was used to convey secret messages between lovers and friends. And it was so popular that there were volumes created with detailed information about the meaning and symbolism of each flower. That didn't really extend that much to the Americas, but it was very big in the UK at the time. Blue flowers can mean a lot of things, though, so I wasn't able to place exactly what the flower was and what the meaning was, but it did seem that she was trying to send some sort of signal before she killed Thorne. So I hope that, again, that comes up again. It was just very obvious.
To have her cast out Lorna, who's searching for James, made him feel more confident in his position. That's the only way he falls asleep.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's clear that he is detached from reality in the sense that even with the Pig of Pall Mall, which is essentially a satirical, it was a seditious tavern song that was talking about George IV and his mistress and how they created this love nest together and all that stuff. He thinks that's about James and about James's cannibalism, and it has nothing to do with James. And Lorna calls him on it. Like he thinks everything is James. He even says, that all of London wants to know where James Delaney is. Like he's lost his mind.
Yeah, and he can be completely despicable and pathetic in the same scene. Right as he's trying to intimidate Lorna, he can also be self-loathing and pathetic, saying, "Oh, why did you think I wouldn't be here? That I'd be at work? Well, I don't have work. Well, I don't have anything." He's a pathetic shell of a man who, when he finally gets that little tidbit of redemption, that the position possibly for them to move to Australia, he takes a chance to jump on it and tries to man up a bit. But he is just one big mess.
Speaking of messes, Zilpha not only still has the scars of the beating that was left from her, but she's trying to, cover it with a veil and trying to seem like she's upset. But when she returns back to the house, James seems to be attracted by this. Gene, you also mentioned that this kind of turned you on.
Yeah, Zilpha is absolutely gorgeous when she's evil. Like, I thought that she was beautiful before, just right up my alley, spooky, big eyes, dark hair, pale. But this transformation when she's evil, when she puts her top hat on for the funeral and drops the veil, and then she puts that needle through the hat and through her bun, I like nearly fainted. I was like, where did this dream woman come from? Although I also started to realize that if you guys are familiar with Chris Corner from IMX, he used to be the lead singer of Sneaker Pimps. Everybody go right now, Google Chris Corner IMX. And yeah, she's slowly turning into Chris Corner, which makes me kind of question what's going on in my pants. I don't know. But it gets super hot. I mean, this is what I wanted to see this is the sort of a romance that I can relate to when they finally are in the room and the door is shut and James... This is how James romances, take off that fucking dress now. And this show just delivered for me at this point. I was completely into this scene. I thought it was great. Maybe could have done without, dead mom's ghost reaching out to him. But other than that, super hot.
There's nothing more I hate than when I'm trying to be intimate with my half-sister than when my dead mom is trying to talk to me telepathically from the dead.
Did anyone get the sense that James was grossed out by Zilpha's glee over killing Thorne? I thought he would be. I thought that's where we're supposed to go with that. But he actually seemed like rather unfazed. He was more upset with, just very factual. Like, I need to go get rid of the body or you'll hang. Like, gotta go now. You stay here.
Yeah, I think he was bothered by the reckless manner in which she did it and not actually thinking ahead of leaving the body there and what were the ramifications. But he was definitely turned on by her turn to the dark side.
Was he turned on or was he trying to punish her?
Oh, there was no punishing there.
You don't think that he's trying to punish her for the fact that she's doing everything out of the order that he wants? Like, it seemed as if this was a bother to him, that he had to go clean up her mess. And as a result of it, she's going to pay him back with this. And then she's going to be punished as a result of it.
I didn't take it that way. I did think that, more importantly, I think what we saw here was that we kind of wondered why Zilpha was allowing herself to be controlled by Thorne, why she was turning to religion so strongly. And I had guessed that maybe it's because the guilt over her sins was so extreme. I thought she had big guilt over little sins. I think this is quite different. I think we're going to see that Zilpha's childhood, or the way she behaved pre-Thorne, might have been much darker than we ever imagined.
Yeah, but I mean, so you think that the whole sex scene between Zilpha and James, that was love?
Oh yeah.
You don't think that was?
I don't know if it's love,
just sex and because they didn't finish, they didn't climax. He got weirded out, like he was about to kill her.
I think love and lust are easily intertwined. So I think it was definitely an animal desire of lust, whether it's truly what you would say like a loving relationship. I don't think there's anything normal about their relationship.
So are they going to end up together, or do you think that he's kind of done with it now that he's conquered it?
Oh no, he's not done with it now, but I don't think they end up together. I think everybody loses in this.
Well, this leads me to one peculiar interaction. At the funeral, James goes out and decides to take the pickaxe and the shovel from the burial crew and decides to dig the hole deeper. Now, we know that Dumbarton had already marked Thomas's death as due to cholera. What was the purpose of James going out there and almost creating an additional scene? We know that James is a clearly visible character within London who people already, there's rumors about him being the devil and he's evil and he's up to no good. Is it a bright move for him to show up at the funeral of his rival and then jump in the hole and start digging?
I thought the same thing, and the only thing that came to mind was, remember when Zilpha speaks about how deep Horace was buried, and she said, I buried him to the depth of my love, or my affection, And I wonder if this was, again, a parallel where James was saying, okay, if that's her modus operandi, I better get out there and dig that thing deeper because she's not going to have him buried very deep. I thought it was a poetic turn. At the same time, yeah, it makes no sense strategically, but I think we've established here that James is just not making sense anymore.
So those are all the topics that I wanted to discuss for this episode. Are there any other conversations or things that we want to talk about before we shut things down, get ready for the river rants on Friday?
Yeah, I have a few shout-outs from shatontv.com. Again, the shout-outs are basically just a way that people can show their support for the show, and we'll read your name on the air, and thank you for being a listener. If you would like a shout-out for yourself, go to shatontv.com, and if you scroll down, there'll be a slide-out. You can just click on it, type in your name, and we will give you a shout-out on the show. This week's shout-outs, we got a ton of them. Connor Rivera, the very clever Suck Madik, nicely done. Stephanie, Tommy, Sissy from Texas, Eileen, Kisslina, and Alvin. Thank you again for your shout-outs. We really, really appreciate it. And again, go on shatontv.com, and you can get a shout-out for yourself. Impress your friends.
I just want to ask one quick question here. We've kind of wagered sometimes on what we think, where the plot's going. Do you believe that James is capable or actually did kill Winter?
Yes.
Gene?
Is he capable? Yes.
Okay, of course, he's capable of doing anything. Do we believe that in
no, I mean, the question is he capable of killing a child, though? It's a whole different story. Now, do I think he did it? No. Is it possible? Yes. Do I hope he did it? Yes.
You hope he did it?
Yeah, I hope he did it. It makes a much more complex story, of course.
Well, I went back and looked at the wounds, and the wounds did not seem consistent with James's techniques. It was a little simpler. It wasn't as precise, and I think it's made to look like it was him.
Well, if you look at the weapons there in the scene, and it's not his karambit, it looks like a machete that's on the hull of a ship. So if somebody's setting him up, they fucked up. Like that's not the way he would go. He didn't have a machete on him.
Yeah, it's a frame job, totally. Like, who hasn't woken up with a dead prostitute and wondered? Total frame job.
I've never seen so many dead whores. Lord knows I have.
If there's anything that we've missed during this week's deep dive, please feel free to write in and with your thoughts and analysis and questions, and we will read that and respond to it on Friday's edition of Taboo River Rants. That email address is hosts@shatontv.com. As Gene mentioned, if you don't have an email but still want us to say your name at the end of each episode, you can do that on our website. There's a slide out that says be a part of the show, and just write in your name right there. You can check out all of our emails and other things and happenings that's going on our website, shatontv.com. That concludes this week's of Taboo Deep Dive. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're everywhere on social media, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. We're also on Facebook. Just search for Shat on TV podcasts. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really helps the podcast grow. You can also check out our store on the website for cool Shat on TV merchandise. That helps keep the lights on. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Also, be sure to join us over at Shat the Movies, where we will be reviewing this week Revenge of the Nerds. You can check out all of our fun stuff that's happening over at Shat on TV. Over at Shat the Movies by navigating to shatthemovies.com. With that being said, gentlemen, let's close this week's episode down. Get ready for River Rants and Shat the Movies. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you on Friday. Take care.